Like, he had got a lot of respect on the streets and whatever. And he'd always said he wanted to kill someone to know what it felt like. I never took it as anything more than, the ramblings of a troubled kid.
According to Autumn, Stephen had apparently proclaimed at one point, "You have no idea what I'm capable of."
Steve had mentioned in the past that he wanted to kill his mom because there was a lot of animosity between them because she degraded him in his opinion. He was thinking very seriously and discussing with Chris Gribble about murdering his mother, Stephen's mother.
This sort of obsession with murder and enjoyment of the act itself is common among people with severe antisocial personality disorder. Oftentimes, they'll commit murder as a means to an end, such as to obtain money or to avoid being caught if a victim lives and is able to identify them. It's less common when the person actually takes pleasure in the act of murder. This is often evidenced by the weapon that is chosen and the manner that the murder was executed. For instance, using a machete may indicate enjoyment of the process, since it involves closer contact with the victim and their death is prolonged. Using a firearm could indicate that the person simply wanted to kill the victim as quickly as possible, as it provides physical distance and often kills quickly.
Steve had mentioned before that he's killed multiple people. He said this one wasn't his first mom and daughter job either. But we were in the driveway.
It's possible that Stephen was lying about his alleged previous murders to impress the group. However, it may have also been a form of manipulation. He wanted them to feel confident that he'd already gotten away with murder before, so they could trust that he would make sure they got away with it this time too. Although Stephen's claims have never been confirmed, the fact that he would make such alarming claims is enough to shock you to your core. After the horrific ordeal, Christopher and Stephen made their way to Autumn's house around 5 in the morning, where the young man seemed to be unaware of what had just occurred.
I was looking at him, and I was like, "What do you want?" And he's like, "Nothing, I'm just amped. I've got a massive adrenaline rush right now." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Oh, we just killed 2 people." Like, he said it really nonchalantly. And being Steve and his stories previously, I was like, yeah, okay. I didn't believe a word of what he said.
Autumn was of the impression that they had committed a robbery and not a murder. However, as the attackers showcased their newfound possessions, he was more than willing to help dispose of the evidence.
Chris grabbed the bag of clothes and was carrying it, and Steve and I knew the path pretty well because that's where we used to go and smoke weed. And so we went down there. Steve and Chris were trying to decide who was going to throw the stuff into the river. And Steve's like, "Autumn, why don't you just throw it in?" And I was like, all right. I was extremely disturbed as to the story which they were telling me. I became very, very nervous because from the detail, it just seemed to be incredibly real.
Hoping to put some distance between them and the murder, they planned to burn the remaining evidence, but Autumn supposedly had the idea of throwing it into the Nashua River instead. Although, ironically enough, he would ultimately be the one to lead police directly to it. Although Autumn asserts that he had no previous knowledge of the intended crime, his story seems to contain a few holes.
I was scared because, as far as I knew, I was sitting in a room with 2 murderers.
Is that why you made jokes? That you're not smarter than a 5th grade?
I make jokes because it helps me stay calm. And I was very scared. Those jokes didn't start occurring until after Billy had texted Steve saying that the little girl had survived. On Saturday, Steve had looked me in the face and said, "There are only 5 people who know about this. 4 of us who did it, and you. If it comes down to police showing up, we know you ratted. And I love you like a brother, but I'll kill you. I will kill you and anyone you care about."
During his interrogation, Autumn jumped at the first opportunity to confess, showing where he, Stephen, and Christopher had thrown a black trash bag with a small jewelry box, an air conditioner screen, rubber gloves, a plastic bag with an insurance card belonging to David Cates, a red sweatshirt with Stephen's name, socks with Christopher's name, and several other items placed inside. Christopher and Stephen had also buried some of the remaining jewelry, the machete, a knife, and 2 iPods, one from the Cates' home and one from their previous robbery in a wooded area near Christopher's house. But not before they had a chance to show off the terrifying weapons to their friends. Hours after the murder had taken place, Christopher, Stephen, Billy, and another friend, Eldon Spikes, had all been hanging out at their regular spot, Walmart, where Stephen had supposedly revealed the tale of horror. He was excited to tell the story, supposedly stating that he wished he could do it again, although the friends were unsure if Eldon had taken the words into account, considering that he had allegedly been high on numerous drugs. Christopher and Stephen then traveled to the Pheasant Lane Mall in Nashua, selling the jewelry for $130 at a cash for gold store, where they were actually stopped by police for appearing suspicious. They were informed that multiple robberies had recently taken place in Brookline and Mount Vernon. But of course, the two didn't confess their guilt. As a result, the officer didn't question them any further, but little did he know, he was staring into the faces of stone-cold killers. Later that day, Christopher and Stephen traveled to their friend Kyle Fenton's home, located in Brookline, and brought the machete and knife along with them. There, they proudly revealed their haunting secret, spilling every shocking detail about the murder and parading the weapons as if it were show and tell. But what the teenagers managed to forget was that not everyone would share in their excitement at the gruesome crime, and some might even report it to the police. Fortunately, when Kyle informed his mother of the situation, she did exactly that. Christopher and Stephen's grandiosity had unsurprisingly backfired. In their excitement, they got too boastful and essentially participated in turning themselves in.
If I were to tell you that Eldon said he was threatened, would that surprise you?
No.
No? Do you know Eldon was threatened?
I don't know if he was threatened.
Did you hear that he had been threatened?
No.
You don't know anything about that threat?
No.
Okay. Again, I'm going to ask you, have you heard any more details after the fact? Any of the guys talking about it? They seemed quite amused by it. They seemed amused by it. Who's they?
Stevie and Chris.
Stevie and Chris. Was Quinlan amused by it?
I didn't really see him that much that night. Like, I didn't talk to him. He didn't talk to me. He didn't really talk much.
What did they say that made you thought they were amused?
They just laughing about it. They seemed to not really care.
So initially you said it was just small chatter, but...
Well, this was, after, in the house they didn't really talk much. But afterwards they said that, I guess they said pretty much it was fun. It was fun.
Who said it was fun?
Probably Stevie.
However, the disturbing jokes were not shared by everyone, as Quinn was in disbelief at the gruesome attack.
Chris was just saying that he was happy he got the kid, and we had a little bit of an argument over that, just over the ethics of it.
Who had the argument, you and Chris?
Me and Chris. It wasn't a heated argument, but he said he was happy that he got the kid, and I said, no, not women and children.
Quinn goes on to chillingly state that Stephen wanted to get Chris into killing by committing such an act. Unfortunately, the disturbing plan seemed to have worked.
Stevie and Chris were just going back and forth about just having a rush.
Did they say anything more specifically about what they had done?
It was halfway down the dirt road. That's when Chris said he was happy he got the girl. Stevie was making the machete joke.
I'm sorry, what was the machete joke?
He was making a joke about, she woke up to get hacked to death by a machete. Chris and Stevie were just very jovial in a rush. I was agreeing, going along with it, because I was just in a house and one of my friends and a new acquaintance just killed people, and I wasn't about to disagree with anything. Billy said something about being put in the newspaper, and Stevie said something. He said, yeah, we're going to be in the paper, but not us.
According to Quinn, Billy had wanted to be in the newspaper ever since he was a child, and given his crime, it seemed that it didn't matter how. Sunday night, the four criminals, along with Eldon, had been visiting at Quinn's house when the hangout suddenly turned volatile. Stephen, worried about Eldon's knowledge of the homicide, wished to dispose of the loose end. Unsurprisingly, Christopher was on board to commit yet another murder. But thankfully, Quinn stepped between the three and pleaded for Eldon's life. He assured his accomplices that not a word would be spoken of the incident, ultimately ending the confrontation.
Billy, apparently either his friend or his friend, like, it was either one of Steve's friends or it was like Billy's sister or something like that. One of his friend's sisters goes to school, the same place that the little girl did. Mm-hmm. And so it's all around the school. And so we got on the online telegraph thing on Autumn's computer.
Yep.
And looked at it and found out the girl had survived. There wasn't a lot on there, but they gave me a really hard time. They were like, wow, Chris, you couldn't even kill a 10-year-old. Gave me a really hard time.
Who's they?
Steve and Autumn.
Mm-hmm.
Steve was like, at least I killed my...
Christopher says this almost as if he wants the investigators to feel bad for him, rather than focusing on the fact that they just murdered a mother and brutally assaulted her child. Presenting Stephen in this way may be helpful to Christopher's case, although Stephen may or may not have said this. It's in Christopher's best interest to display Stephen as the more unempathetic and violent criminal. That way, Christopher believes he looks like a bit of a victim compared to his monster of a friend. On top of this, the other three apparently referred to Christopher as a murder virgin, as he was unable to complete the thrill kill.
I'm kind of surprised she's alive. I'm not sure. I kind of wish she died for her sake, just because she's going to have to live with all that now.
Give me a luck,
If I'm going to kill someone, I'm going to actually do it so that they don't have to sit and live with a bunch of trauma. I've been through so much trauma, I don't want someone to go through that. Mm-hmm. So if I can just end it for them, then I would.
This bizarre claim may all be a front. Christopher may feel a sense of failure because Jamie lived. He doesn't want to be viewed as weak, so he suggests that he's only disappointed for her sake when in actuality, it likely has everything to do with him and nothing to do with her. At the same time, Christopher is once again presenting himself as a victim. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. Following the chilling confessions, Billy had supposedly discussed with his dad the idea of selling his story to various media outlets, another indication of how heartless he was. In the end, Billy and Quinn were given plea deals for testifying against Christopher and Stephen. Billy pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, burglary, and first-degree assault, and sentenced to 30 to 60 years behind bars. In comparison, Quinn pleaded guilty to burglary, robbery, and conspiracy to commit burglary, receiving a sentence of 20 to 40 years. Autumn was eventually sentenced to a minimum of 5 years for hindering apprehension and conspiracy to hinder apprehension. In an unsuccessful attempt to avoid a first-degree murder charge, Christopher pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The idea he'd been insane was quickly denied by the court psychiatrist, stating that he was well aware of his behavior and actively chose to commit such a horrendous crime. During his trial, Stephen appeared to not take the proceedings seriously when he made a shocking and unusual request to his attorney.
He said no.
There are a few different reasons behind this kind of behavior. One possibility is that Stephen could be trying to manipulate the situation and gain sympathy from the jury. By reminding them that it's his birthday, he might hope that the jury will feel more inclined to be lenient in their sentencing or view him as more human and relatable. Another possibility is that he is simply trying to exert control over the situation. By asking about his birthday and the possibility of the jury singing, he's taking an active role in the proceedings and potentially even trying to dictate the mood or tone of the courtroom. It's also possible that he's simply trying to assert some kind of dominance and show that he is unfazed by the gravity of the situation. Regardless of the specific motivation, It's clear that this kind of behavior is concerning and indicative of a serious lack of empathy or remorse, and shows that he's completely out of touch with the situation and why he's sitting there in the first place. In contrast, Christopher allegedly stated that if given the chance, nothing could prevent him from killing again. Both Stephen and Christopher were eventually convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Although in 2012, the United States Supreme Court ruled against sentencing minors to life without receiving any chance of parole. But shockingly, Stephen filed a motion not to appeal his conviction, and the New Hampshire Supreme Court granted it. Stephen's rationale behind the decision being that he is the most sick and twisted person you'll ever meet and should never be given a second chance. We reached out to speak with Stephen, but he declined to comment on the case. William Marks and Quinn Glover, who stood by and did absolutely nothing while Kimberly and Jamie were attacked, are likely to be paroled in the coming years. Quinn was granted parole on his robbery charge and will likely be released in 2029. William will be eligible for parole in 2024. Autumn Savoy was already released on parole in 2015. When police discovered the most gruesome murder they had ever come across in the small town of Clyde, Ohio, one detective in particular was determined to track down the depraved killer. However, the ghastly scene would not be the only shocking revelation in a case plagued by police corruption, where it seemed that an unhinged obsession placed blame on a group of innocent suspects, all while overlooking the monster hiding in plain sight, eventually landing a detective behind bars. The following interviews and interrogations have never been seen or heard before. They've been analyzed by a qualified team, including a licensed attorney, a licensed clinical psychologist, a former licensed professional counselor, and a licensed professional counselor.
Fremont Police, do you have emergency?
I'll be over there about 10 minutes to give you information about the woman that was murdered over there in Clyde.
Heather Bowden was a devoted young mother working a graveyard shift at the local Whirlpool factory to support her 5-year-old daughter. It was a means to an end, as she was also pursuing a career in nursing in order to better support herself and her little girl. On April 9, 2015, surveillance footage captured Heather leaving the Clyde facility at 6:17 a.m. No one could have ever imagined that this would be the last time Heather would be seen alive. The crime itself was unthinkable, but even more mind-blowing was the tangled web of deception that would be unraveled during the course of the investigation. It was the type of case where nothing was as it appeared to be. Heather had a history of depression. Just 2 years prior, she'd allegedly attempted to take her own life and was prescribed the drug lamotrigine. Knowing this, after she went missing, her mother feared that another attempt may have been made, and a frantic search quickly ensued. It would only be one day before Heather's loved one's worst fears were confirmed. On April 10th, police located Heather's vehicle outside the Somerton Apartments on Hickory Street in Clyde, Ohio, prompting officers to believe that she might have been inside of the complex. However, they quickly learned that this was sadly not the case. They never anticipated that while searching Heather's car, they would open the trunk to find the missing woman's lifeless body resting inside. Authorities were barely able to stomach the horrendous wounds that Heather had endured, including various bruises and marks among her legs, arms, and face, indicating that someone had mercilessly beaten her. Not only this, but shockingly, her hair had been cut off at the scalp, and her fingernails were shaven all the way down to the cuticles. She had marks around her wrists and ankles, signifying that she'd been bound and tied. Ultimately, her cause of death was determined to be 2 gunshots to her back, which punctured vital organs in her chest. Defensive wounds found on Heather's hands told investigators that, despite horrific attack, she fought for every last second of her life. Along with this, it was determined that her Galaxy Samsung cell phone, purse, a set of keys, and Whirlpool work shirt were all missing. The police, too stunned to comprehend the horrific sight before them, were now on a manhunt for the mysterious killer. But, unbeknownst to them, their window of time was closing by the second. Still, they had a lead. Heather had been facing a rather tumultuous season in her life. She was in the middle of a devastating breakup with an ex-girlfriend, Carmela Badillo, and the relationship hadn't necessarily ended on good terms. Both of the women had met during their time at Whirlpool, and they officially began dating in 2014. Throughout the romance, the couple would often fight over various subjects, but at the forefront were Heather's supposed allegations of infidelity against Carmela. It wasn't long before their issues would create a permanent rift between the two, and the year-long relationship would come to an end just 3 days before Heather's disappearance. In texts recovered through Heather's phone company on April 8th, the fury between the two was clear. In one message, Carmela stated, "Last night wasn't something small, Heather. I have to make appointments with a cardiologist and was doing various tests all night. I thank God for my mom being there. She's the only one who will ever have my back and care about me. I would have never not been by your side. I don't ever in this lifetime want to speak to you again. Goodbye." Apparently, Carmela had faced an unexpected illness the previous night and requested that Heather come to her aid, even though they'd been broken up. But seeing as she had a shift to attend, Heather was unable to make it. In response, Heather wrote, "I had your back. I couldn't lose my job. I'm already so far behind in bills, it's ridiculous. And I have nobody to help me out or even be here for me. And you kept pushing away. I wanted to be there for you. I honestly did and still do. But I understand I cannot know what is going on if you do not talk to me. But please do continue to take everything out on me." Following the breakup, Heather also texted her friend Jerry Avalos on April 8th, saying, "I deactivated Facebook and all other social media. Literally never talked to my friends. Couldn't even have a friend. She wouldn't allow it." It's a clear red flag when a partner tries to control who the other person can talk to or be friends with. It's important to remember that Heather was upset about the breakup when she sent this message, and it's possible that Carmela has a very different viewpoint on their relationship. When officers recovered Heather's body, they also discovered a shocking handwritten letter in the vehicle. It was one of passion and rage, each sentence more intense than the last. Unfortunately, it's unknown what was written, but every single word had been directed at Heather, almost as if they wanted to hurt her. To no surprise, the penman had been none other than her scorned ex-girlfriend. But this wasn't the only relationship that seemed to be falling apart for Heather, as additional texts showcased an obscene message from her brother, Josh Fiesel. Heather had recently failed one of her nursing exams, and Josh added to the upsetting occasion. He wrote, "Too stupid to pass the LPN exam," and called her a demeaning name. He also texted, "Low expectations of yourself, typical trash like your mom and dad." Josh's cruelty towards Heather was no secret to their friends and family, but could he have gone so far as to take her life? Well, the lead detective on the case, Sean O'Connell, had his eyes set on uncovering the answer to this very question. However, as we will soon come to learn, his methods were far from the ordinary. Still, no one could have predicted the scandal that was about to unravel. Despite the varying fights with Carmela and Josh, it wouldn't take long before they were dismissed as potential suspects. As the hunt for the killer continued, Detective O'Connell quickly located a new person of interest. Tenants had reportedly told the detective that they had seen Heather frequently visiting Building 240 of the Somerton Apartments, well before her body was found in the parking lot. It was believed that she would allegedly purchase marijuana from an unknown resident of the complex. When this information was discovered, Detective O'Connell began to dig and eventually found his new lead suspect, 24-year-old Kiona Bohr, thanks to a complaint filed against her by another occupant. had alleged that the scent of marijuana was emanating from her apartment. Kiona, a mother of two, was supposedly very nervous while speaking with police after Heather's body was discovered, and Detective O'Connell found this to be rather odd. Though she denied any involvement, O'Connell wasn't convinced. Despite this, following her discussion with the authorities, Kiona wrote a series of strange Facebook posts, especially under the given circumstances. I can't believe this just happened, and doing 8 to 10 years for murder and pleading insanity could be seen amongst her account, only furthering the detective's suspicions. Not only this, but according to 2 residents of the Somerton apartments, Kiona was allegedly seen wearing the same red Mickey Mouse t-shirt that Heather's body had been dressed in, well before the tragic event. And lastly, Kiona had been romantically involved with 39-year-old Julian Kaiser, who Detective O'Connell helped to put behind bars for 10 years on a first drug offense. It seemed that the evidence against Kiona was beginning to mount. 4 days after Heather's body was recovered, Kiona was interviewed by Detective O'Connell, and as you're about to see, the tension in the room was so thick it could have been cut with a knife.
Do you know that name by chance, Heather Bogle? Okay.
I know who she is. The only time I heard of her was when the police knocked on the door, and then I didn't even know who she was. I was like, I don't know her. And then I went inside and got on my Facebook, and I seen her on Facebook.
Obviously, for one reason or another, her vehicle ends up at the Hickory Street Apartments parked in front of your building 240. The question is, why did it end up there? So we've talked to a lot of people, and we are comfortable to say that Heather has been known to frequent building 240. We feel comfortable that she was voluntarily there probably on Thursday of last week, a couple different times. She was there, then her vehicle left, and the vehicle would come back, and then the vehicle leaves, and then it finally comes back for the last time on Friday morning at around 1:30. Okay.
So why am I here then?
Yeah, I'm getting to that point. It's my understanding that Heather likes to smoke some weed. Okay, she does it almost probably on a somewhat regular basis. She has to buy it from somebody. We know that we've had complaints on your particular apartment in reference the odor of marijuana coming from it from one time or another that led to the police knocking on the door and trying to figure out.
The police never came to my door. If the police came to my door, they better have a report. The police never like
There is a police report.
They talked to me. They
There's a
spoke
police
to me.
report on March 18th. Without going back and looking at the police report, I'm not going to say that they talked to you now, but I know there is a police report. There are incidents reports with management pertaining to the smell of marijuana from your apartment.
So why hasn't anybody said anything to me previously?
I don't
My
know.
landlord, the
That's a
police.
good question. I
That's
guess.
real sketchy because yesterday a white man came up to me and asked me, were you the one that they had got in trouble for smoking weed that was smelling like weed in the hallway? And I said, no, that wasn't me. I don't even smoke weed. And he said, well, I do every now and then. We were trying to get me to say something. So it was probably him that tried to call you. This is so silly. This is crazy. Like, y'all just raided my house. I work at a nursing home. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. Like, this is crazy.
I understand.
Kiona comes across as quite self-assured. When someone is telling the truth, they may appear more confident because they know the facts are on their side. The detective should have built some kind of relationship with her prior to starting into questions about Heather. Essentially, what he has done here is without any evidence whatsoever, he has launched into an interrogation rather than conduct an actual interview first.
It's my understanding, and another thing that kind of supports what we're looking at is the idea that you have dated a guy from Mississippi. He's the worker, correct?
Who would say that?
Well,
I never dated anybody just because I talked to somebody. Like,
all right. So you talk to somebody if so.
They're not even here. They've been left months and months and months ago. So.
Okay, what's months and months and months ago?
Like months ago when they went home, we was never dating.
Who's the two guys that keep coming and going out of your apartment?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
How does it matter? My personal business, I don't know this girl.
Business is not becoming our business.
Okay, so who I sleep with is y'all business. No. Like, I mean, that's what I do. That's all I'm doing. So that doesn't have anything to do with this. That's what I'm saying.
These are the questions that we're going to ask, and these are the questions we're asking.
Okay, well, I mean, if I need a lawyer, I can get a lawyer, but I don't. I mean, I'm just saying.
You're not in charge of anything right now.
Homicide. If we can tie your apartment into a homicide investigation.
You can't tie my apartment. You can.
Maybe not.
I know you can't. I don't even know this girl, so I know for 100% you can't.
Apparently, two different men had visited Kiona at her apartment on various occasions in the recent past. Omar Satchel and Carrie Jeffrey. It wasn't long before Detective O'Connell considered them additional suspects in Heather's gruesome murder. And soon, we will see exactly why that was.
But this is the thing. That's why we're asking. That's why we're asking the questions. And if
right, but you guys just raided my apartment. You know, yesterday when I went to my house and got that paper, my neighbors ran for me. Like I'm out here killing people. Like y'all just ruined my life over this because I smoked some weed. Like this crazy.
Okay, we had probable cause to search your apartment.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm just saying, like that's.
Right.
I've never seen this girl in my life. Don't know this girl, nothing.
But maybe those who you associate yourself with have.
Maybe people they associate themselves with. Did you talk to the previous neighbors that lived there? Why are you being
so reluctant on wanting to tell us who you
Because
associate?
y'all just raided my house. They took my baby daddy to prison for 11 years. Y'all think I'm like
to me, Kiona? Sounds like you withholding information.
No, it sounds like this is ridiculous.
There is an important distinction here with Kiona talking about getting a lawyer. She didn't unequivocally ask to speak with a lawyer, which is why the officer continued talking to her. If this case were to go to trial, Kiona's attorneys could have argued that this should have been interpreted as a request for counsel. But it's not incumbent upon police to clarify statements, and they don't have to stop an interrogation if a suspect makes an ambiguous statement about requesting counsel. This means that the burden of clearly invoking the right rests with the suspect. It's also important to note that though Kiona is being questioned by officers, she was free to leave at any time, and was neither detained nor under arrest, which means that the Miranda requirements are not in play here. It also appears that the officer was allowing emotion to control him. It's apparent he did little to build rapport with Kiona, and the major example of this is by accusing her of having something to hide. The most important aspect of Reed is to effectively have officers be viewed as advocates, possibly even allies, rather than as adversaries. Instead, the officer should have engaged in asking more open-ended questions, rather than throwing multiple accusations at Kiona. By failing to literally be curious and invite Kiona to tell her story, the officer instead made judgments which shut down further discourse, and didn't do anything to win her over. It's not uncommon to see officers become frustrated during an interview or interrogation for a number of reasons. However, a much better strategy is to show the suspect a way out of the mess they find themselves in. This way out is generally couched as the truth will set you free. Most of the time, it won't set them physically free, but it can be a means to unload a burden via telling officers the truth. In these circumstances, officers emphasize remaining open and non-accusatory, even when presenting facts that contradict previous statements. This allows the conversation to continue.
Y'all just ruined my life for some little...
Hey, we didn't ruin anybody's life.
This ain't little, it's a homicide.
I mean, but I don't know anything about it, but this is what I'm...
Apparently you do, because you're not telling us who your boyfriends are.
I don't have boyfriends.
Then who are the guys that keep coming and going?
I don't know.
It does matter, because we're talking about a homicide.
I mean, am I being charged with something? Am I getting arrested?
Not yet.
Okay, then. I mean, I can get a lawyer and come back.
If you want to get a lawyer, go get a lawyer. That just tells me you got something to hide.
I don't have anything to hide,
well,
but I know how y'all are.
You feel the need. Oh, how are we?
I don't know.
Because we got your boyfriend father your baby with a bunch of dope, and he's been a doper for his whole entire life.
Okay.
We're in the wrong.
So that's why you raided my house.
No, that's not why.
That's probably
because you had marijuana in your house.
But you didn't know that?
Yeah, we did. We had reason to believe it.
You had reason to believe that because somebody said that.
We had probable cause.
Because someone said they smelled odor, never been in my house, never talked to me. The police didn't come to my door and see if there was marijuana.
Your association with Julian Kaiser when
You've been in prison for how long?
I don't care. You're still associated with
I'm associated with somebody that's in prison.
Do you want to talk or not?
I don't want to talk.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
You're now involved in a homicide investigation.
Very good.
The detectives may be misinterpreting Keona's reluctance to share the names of the two men. She's likely trying to protect her friends, but that does not mean they are guilty. It's also extremely manipulative for the detective to tell her that by asking for a lawyer, she had something to hide, when in actuality, he was just irritated that she was making a smart decision for herself. Nonetheless, the unrelenting pressure from the detectives left all parties in a state of frustration. But Keona was living a real-life nightmare, suspected of murder and was now in a fight for her life. After the troubling interview, authorities were looking into the possibility of charging 3 people with the crime, as they began to investigate Omar and Kayri. Omar, who had previously served prison time for home invasion and firearm charges, had allegedly sold marijuana to Heather, as reported by O'Connell, although this has never been confirmed. When police finally spoke with Omar, he supposedly admitted to having stolen a .380 caliber firearm from his fiancée, but claimed to have sold the gun to a resident living in Michigan not long after. Along with this, authorities allegedly found him to be in possession of unidentified pills and a pocket knife with a blonde strand of hair attached. In an interview with the Fremont News Messenger, Omar adamantly denied that he had ever met or known Heather, gravely pleading for his innocence. In a shocking quote, he described his encounter with Detective O'Connell by saying that, "Sean O'Connell told me, I know it's not you, but I'll make it you." Of course, the detective would deny having ever uttered the threat, but the truth of the matter remains up in the air. Be that as it may, later actions by O'Connell that you'll soon learn of might have you drawing your own conclusions. Omar also stated that during the days of April 8th through the 10th, when Heather was missing, he was residing at the Days Inn Hotel. At the time of Heather's murder, he claimed to have been visiting 3 separate bars in the Fremont area. However, it has also been reported that he was actually hiding at Keona's apartment in an attempt to evade an arrest warrant. Despite this, O'Connell was still extremely skeptical and supposedly insinuated that Omar could have still traveled from the various locations to commit the crime. Still, his focus shifted to his final suspect, 26-year-old Kayri. As a supposed friend of Omar's, Kayri was just as much on Detective O'Connell's radar, and he would do anything to prove their guilt. According to a source, Kayri was apparently seen throwing a suspicious black bag into a river on April 10, 2015, presumably containing a firearm. O'Connell asserted that the supposed gun was used in a homicide, potentially Heather's, and quickly released a full dive team to recover the weapon. But to O'Connell's dismay, the search would prove to be unsuccessful. Claiming that Keona, Omar, and Kayri were likely the murderers, the detective was still missing one important piece of information: the motive. Why would any of them want to hurt Heather, let alone kill her? Not even O'Connell could say, but suddenly, in the blink of an eye, another disappointment abruptly struck the desperate detective, and it would send the case in an entirely different direction. Underneath Heather's fingernails was a small amount of DNA. The results were shocking, concluding that neither Keona, Omar, or Kayri had come back as a positive match. In an instant, their names were cleared. At least, that's what should have happened. Instead, O'Connell stuck to his original claims, not stopping to even ponder the possibility that he might have been wrong. But his delusions would only lead him further away from the actual killer. This just goes to show how detectives can sometimes develop tunnel vision and narrow in on a suspect, while ignoring other possibilities, despite sufficient evidence. O'Connell had already spent a lot of time on the premise that Keona, Omar, and Kayri were involved in Heather's death. He may have been afraid that if he admitted his mistake, he would look incompetent to both the public and to other members of law enforcement. In addition, he was likely experiencing a psychological principle known as confirmation bias. This means that people are more likely to accept information that supports what they already believe, and on the other hand, may discount information that doesn't align with those beliefs. With this in mind, just over a year later, Kiona is demanding answers.
I just want to know when y'all are going to tell her that I'm not involved in this and I can clear my...
She's saying she knows that her DNA won't come back. It's at what point do we say, okay?
For a year, the detective would supposedly harass Kiona, frequenting her place of work with additional officers. At one point, he apparently gathered Kiona's co-workers for a meeting, although the subject of the matter has never been reported. It wouldn't be too long before the single mother found herself out of work while struggling to make ends meet. Every job interview for a new position was to no avail, and it seemed that O'Connell was never going to let her out of his grasp. These were likely acts of intimidation on O'Connell's part, which is a form of manipulation. He may have believed that he could scare Kiona into confessing, which would have been coercion. Yet, after securing a lawyer, Kiona was able to restrict her contact with the detective, but that wouldn't stop O'Connell from allegedly speaking with her acquaintances. In an interview with the Sandusky Register, Kiona recalled a time when she traveled to her local tattoo artist and was startled to learn that after she left the establishment, Detective O'Connell had allegedly made his way in to speak with the artist. Other accounts recall that the detective apparently had residents of the Somerton apartments act as informants for the investigation, hoping to gain more details on Kiona.
I'm not here to say that you did do it, but I'm not here to say that you didn't do it.
Okay, but I know for a fact you got my DNA there and there's no matches. I know for a fact you got it through my phone record, there's no matches. I know for a fact y'all been looking at my Facebook, there's nothing. I know that.
Kiona's suspicious Facebook posts, as previously described, had actually been in response to Julian's prison sentence. And not only this, but she had never been in possession of the Mickey Mouse shirt found on Heather. Regardless of these revelations, the detective pressed on.
Yeah, it is what it is. If you're not involved, then you're not involved.
Okay, so when you gonna clear me though, because me and my kids...
I don't think we're comfortable to be able to say for sure that it's not you.
This reign of terror would eventually come crashing down. In an attempt to seek an indictment, O'Connell had written a report to the prosecution, but failed to include that the DNA found on Heather did not match any of the three suspects. Along with this, he refrained from giving all of his case files to the county prosecutor and dismissed every other lead, besides those relating to the trio. He even ignored a critical piece of information sent in an email by a Whirlpool employee just 2 days after Heather was found. It read, "And by the way, I don't know if you have any suspects, but I know someone who works at Whirlpool that is very capable of doing that to a woman." This crucial lead would eventually become integral, but in his determination to convict Kiona, Omar, and Kayri, O'Connell did not even take it into consideration. However, this would not go unnoticed. Soon, O'Connell was caught giving a copy of the investigation report to an employee working for the Sandusky County Department of Job and Family Services, claiming that he wanted to gain their insight on a person of interest in the case. Once this was discovered by the sheriff, the detective was immediately placed on leave, but it only took a week to uncover the extent of his malpractice. As a result, the detective was quickly let go from his position and was facing an increasing amount of legal charges, which included misleading a public official and tampering with evidence. O'Connell had broken the law that he vowed to protect and was eventually sentenced to 2 years in prison. Although this would not be the end of the shocking corruption, seeing as how another scandal had just as quickly broken through the walls of this quiet and quaint little town. Sheriff Kyle Overmeyer, also working on Heather's case, had been caught stealing drugs from the drug take-back boxes in northwestern Ohio. Facing an ongoing opioid addiction, Kyle was sentenced to 4 years in prison in December of 2016. But during this time, he was able to sit down with authorities to give his side of the story on what happened with former Detective O'Connell.
And we'll get into more on Sean about what he did, but a lot of stuff was secret squirrel with him, and he did his own thing, and I entrusted in him as a detective, and because you can't do it all, you can't be a detective and a sheriff and wear all the hats.
He was dead set on Keanu Bohr, and then he found out that Omar might have been out.
Was hiding out there. He was there that night supposedly, and there was a warrant for his arrest. And that's where it all unraveled, where he became obsessed.
Why is that?
I don't know.
See, now here's another thing I'm being told.
Yeah.
That he had a personal vendetta against Keanu Bohr.
Kyle gives a brief rundown on how O'Connell helped to imprison Keona's ex-boyfriend, Julian, and why that might have placed the single mother at the top of his suspect list in Heather's case.
Now, in speaking to Heather's family members and Carmela Badillo, they all indicated that the 3 people that provided Heather her drugs were, and then was the other. Oh, there's only 3. Nobody ever mentioned Keanu Bohr.
Right.
So I don't know how he's getting in and going Keanu Bohr, and if he's making that up. Then.
Right. And correct? Yes.
All the while, residents across the community were stumped when it came to who might have carried out such a gruesome crime. And some were inclined to leave their thoughts on the most popular social media platform, Facebook. One user wrote a post insinuating that Carmela, Heather's ex-girlfriend, may actually be the one that authorities were looking for. The sad thing about this is just a few days after it happened, my brother worked with a guy who no longer works there with him, but he stopped over and told me his sister and Heather had a thing, and that she might have had something to do with it. I called O'Connell to report what I was told at the time, but nothing was done. Was Heather's ex-girlfriend the perpetrator who'd been hiding in plain sight, or was there someone else sneakily going unnoticed? Still, others had their own opinions. One person even stated that he knew more about the situation than most. A lot of time and dedication was lost, and I have proof. I want it done right. I had to bring up a perfected parliament to do what I did and walk it through like a gentleman. Most area evolved, this person was well aware that corruption was lurking. I trust very few when the problem goes all the way to the top. In addition to the online chatter, others took their concerns directly to authorities. One account in particular stood out. Michael Abdu, a resident of Fremont, Ohio, was in a frantic rush to give a statement on an alleged conversation that had taken place at a nearby bar.
Fremont Police, do you have an emergency?
I'll be over there in about 10 minutes to give you information about the woman that was murdered over there in Clyde.
Michael claims that he met 3 men at the local bar, where one had allegedly explained to him that he ordered the hit on Heather. Michael refers to this man as Mississippi. 2 other gentlemen had also been present, but he didn't know their names.
They informed me how they killed her in the residence and took her body and put it in the trunk of the car. He said if you got any family, I suggest you do the right thing. I said, I don't understand what you're talking about. And then he said, I was the person that took care of the white girl over in Clyde. The black man said this. And I said to him, what are you talking about? What do you mean you took care of the white girl over in Clyde? He said, I asked the 2 dudes inside, we took care of business. So I went and asked the 2 guys inside, hey, some dude said you guys took it, I said Mississippi said you guys took care of those 2, or took care of the girl over there in Clyde. He said, yeah, we gave that what she deserved. The one dude turned to the other guy and said, shut the f*** up. The other one then said, dude's cool. Whatever you gotta say, I'm cool with, I'm not, gonna go nowhere.
Michael, clearly stunned by the recent encounter, provided a new lead for the authorities. However, just as quickly, police were able to conclude that they'd reached a dead end yet again, due to the fact that his story couldn't be corroborated by other patrons of the bar. It was clear that from the onset of Heather's case, each and every day had been afflicted by injustice. Fortunately, that wouldn't last for long. The day had finally come where a new sheriff was in town, determined to track down the real killer with no time to waste. Sheriff Chris Hilton quickly dismissed the previous suspects along with Carmela, and soon enough, he'd also pinpointed exactly where Heather had been following her last shift at Whirlpool. Through her Gmail account, authorities were able to see her movements throughout the entire day of April 9th, thanks to the several electronic coordinates kept in Google's GPS function. This indicated that around 6:30 in the morning, Heather had been at a trailer park home in the Emerald Estates lot, a little over a mile away from Whirlpool. She remained there for at least an hour before her phone had apparently been shut off. The residence was that of 44-year-old Daniel Myers, one of Heather's co-workers at Whirlpool. The authorities were able to speak with Daniel on May 24, 2017, over 2 years after Heather's disappearance.
How you doing, Dan? Hey, Nick Katsopoulos with the Sheriff's Office. Would you be able to take a few minutes and talk to us?
For what reason?
Well, we're working a cold case homicide.
Do you still work for Whirlpool right now then?
Yeah.
Okay. Back then, what shift were you working?
Midnights.
Back then, did you tell them what this is in reference to?
I told them we're working an old homicide.
Okay. Are you sure?
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Sorry to wake you up. I feel bad.
We're just trying to, like I said, follow up on some leads, some other stuff that popped up. Did you know her at all?
Very, very little. Very little.
The officers have not mentioned Heather's name, yet Daniel is already aware of who they are speaking of.
Very limited conversation. I guess if you want to know how long I knew her, maybe 3 months, but how long I talked to her, maybe a couple weeks. And you don't get long breaks at Whirlpool. So, it's like pee, eat within 10 minutes for first break, and it was very limited chit-chat.
Sure. And just so we're on the same page of who we're talking about, right. Heather Bogle, right?
Right.
Okay. Did you work in the same area as her?
Yes.
Okay.
Daniel claims that he and Heather had never talked outside of work and primarily discussed their children while they were on their breaks at Whirlpool.
She was just a sweetheart. She was very concerned about her kid, worked hard. She was always sweeping whenever she wasn't doing it. It was sad. I guess it's a little odd that, you guys are...
Well, here's what
I know it's cold case and you guys are just, grasping at straws trying.
We want to try our best.
Right.
And a part of what we've been doing when we interview people, we've been collecting DNA buccal swabs. It's basically a Q-tip. It's just a little thing, and then we're off on our way. Would you be all right with that?
There's no reason why I would have to do something.
Oh, you don't have to. No, this is part of...
If there's an issue, I'll get an attorney or something. I didn't know really the lady or anything like that, but...
Nobody's saying that. This is just part of being thorough in what we're doing.
I'll pass until there's some issues to where, I'll get my attorney and see what he has to say, but I'm going to pass on that.
The detective is trying to make Daniel more comfortable by mentioning how they ask everyone to provide a DNA test so that he will be more inclined to agree. And while every single person had supposedly agreed to the buccal swab, Daniel is the first to say no. But there was a good reason behind his unwillingness to provide a sample. 2 days later, authorities went knocking on his door once again.
We need to follow up a little bit more in regard to...
All right.
Because you came off work that morning, right?
Right.
Okay. And there was nobody else in your trailer at that time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There was nobody else living but you at that time.
No.
And then Heather was down in the area.
Well, I don't know. How would I know that she's down?
Well, you're at the trailer and she's at the trailer. So that's what we need to get cleared up. And we know this.
She wasn't in my trailer. There is no way she was in my trailer.
She was in your trailer.
Okay, well then you're going to have to show whatever that she was there.
The first time he says she wasn't in my trailer, Daniel ends with upward inflection, as though asking a question, not making a statement. The second time he says it more forcefully. It's almost like he had to ask it as a question first, so he could repeat it to deny it. We know people struggle with outright lies, so this was likely a way to handle his nerves when deceiving the detective. Someone who is wrongfully accused of something is more likely to deny it using a firm tone of voice. An innocent person may even become a bit hostile. However, Daniel gives a quick and weak denial. And not only is his evasive response more than a little worrisome, but Daniel was also hiding a mountain of disturbing secrets, and his true atrocities were about to be revealed.
Because you knew,
I just don't know what
you know Heather better than what you're telling us.
No, I did not know Heather that well. I didn't. There is no way. I don't know anything about her. Just a basic conversation that we had when we sat for a very limited break. That's all it was.
You know what her car looked like, right?
Yeah, I knew what it looked like. No, I didn't know what it looked like. I knew from the news, from online, Facebook. I mean, there's pictures from that's on the Facebook about the car with, going by Miller's. There was a vision of a car. I mean, right. Yeah, I mean, it's common knowledge. I mean, even the news was showing her vehicle, but I've never seen her vehicle personally.
We didn't draw your name out of a hat and show up at your door.
Okay.
So we're here asking you to help yourself out. Let us know what happened.
Detectives are taught to never reveal to suspects what they know. And in addition, they want to give off the impression that they know more than they do. This accomplishes multiple things. For one, it allows officers to catch suspects in a lie. And two, suspects are left wondering how much police know. They may believe that police do know more than they actually do, which makes it more likely that they will let something slip. The officers further explain to Daniel that they are well aware of his involvement, but they want to hear from him just how that came to be, and more so, what exactly happened on that fateful day.
She was never at your trailer before?
No.
Never?
No.
Okay.
There's nothing for me to tell you.
Daniel maintains that Heather was never at his trailer. However, he does give some information relating to what he discussed with her on April 9th at work that day. After failing her nursing exam, she was already feeling down on herself, but the cruel text she received from her brother had only worsened these emotions. When Heather saw the message from Josh around 3:44 a.m., Daniel was supposedly the shoulder that she would cry on. He states that nothing more happened, but as police would soon learn, this couldn't be further from the truth. Following the intense confrontation, they informed Daniel that there is a warrant for his trailer, in addition to his DNA. From here on out, Daniel would be unable to hide the monstrous lie that was masked behind his seemingly normal facade. However, what you're about to see is more shocking than you could ever imagine. Taking a closer look, authorities were stunned to learn that Daniel had apparently mourned the loss of Heather. He attended her funeral and signed the registry book thereafter to pay his respects, even going out of his way to donate $125 to the GoFundMe account of Heather's family, writing a now disturbing message. Heather, you were such an amazing person. Although we've only known one another for a short time, I've come to appreciate our talks about our kids. I'm distraught that there will be no more of your smile at work. You will always be in my thoughts. Your daughter will always be in my prayers. God bless you, little Missy. Danny and Ethan Myers. Apparently, he had also posted to Facebook that he was unable to eat or sleep due to the frightening situation. Daniel likely enjoyed inserting himself into Heather's world this way. He may have felt a secret thrill at the funeral, playing the part of a grieving co-worker, all while relishing in the fact that he was the only one who knew the truth about what happened to her. In addition, he may have believed that staying close to the situation would make him appear less suspicious. But as the investigation continued, it was quite clear to police that things weren't adding up. Just 5 days after Heather was found, Daniel had purchased new plywood flooring for his home, and at the end of the month, a new mattress. Along with this, over a year later, he made a trip to the local dentist to repair a set of cracked and broken teeth. But the reason for the dental visit would be anything but typical. Several other purchases were also discovered, such as materials to repair a deck, lawn chemicals, light bulbs, galvanized nails, and paint. But this could all be explained away, even though a new revelation was far more difficult to rationalize. a warrant had finally been obtained to perform a DNA test on Daniel, and it concluded that the sample from underneath Heather's fingernails was a complete match to that of her co-worker. Over 2 years later, the truth of the devastating matter would finally be revealed. When police officially searched Daniel's trailer, the findings were unsettling, to say the least. Upon entering the residence, investigators found various adult toys, surveillance equipment, a Dell laptop, disposable cameras, handcuffs, jewelry, a pair of women's underwear, and a Samsung Galaxy cell phone. Furthermore, they located several red and brown stains on the bottom of Daniel's carpet. A sample taken from the rug would later come back positive for blood. Not only that, but Daniel had been keeping videotapes, documenting his encounters with women, and had bizarrely Googled nursing textbooks online. In addition, GPS locations from Daniel's truck uncovered that he had frequently driven by Heather's house between the months of March and April of 2015, and had even made his way to the Somerton apartments on one occasion. But once the horrific event took place, his travels around these specific locations came to a sudden halt. This could suggest that Daniel was obsessed with Heather and stalking her, but at some point his behavior escalated. It's possible that if Heather discovered that he was following her and she confronted him, he may have lashed out. Alternatively, he may have expressed interest in her and she rejected him, which made him angry. On top of this, there was also alleged evidence that Daniel may even be connected to more than one crime. On June 1st, 2017, 2 years after Heather's horrendous murder, Daniel was finally taken into custody. One of the investigators asked the other officer to remove the handcuffs from Daniel and instead handcuffs him to a hardpoint in the interrogation room. It seems as though the officers aren't comfortable at this point to completely uncuff him.
Okay, you were told you were under arrest, correct? Okay, no Miranda rights at all. Okay. So nobody's spoken to you yet. That's what we're going to do this right now. Right. Oh, you are under arrest. And that, I heard the deputy tell you that when we were out there.
No, not.
Okay. And he said that, but he didn't tell you anything else.
Right.
Okay. We're here to tell you this is in connection with the Heather Bola. Okay.
The officer reads Daniel his Miranda rights, and he quickly requests an attorney, although he still answers one question.
What is your passcode for your phone?
In about a week. Can we write it down?
Yes.
Passcodes to cellular phones are protected under the Fifth Amendment in some jurisdictions, and the contents of a phone are generally protected under the Fourth Amendment. In all likelihood, Daniel just waived some very important Fourth and Fifth Amendment protections by voluntarily giving up his passcode and consenting to a search of his device. You should never give up a phone, its passcode, or its contents without a warrant. Even then, good counsel will attempt to have this warrant overturned, or the admission of evidence obtained via the warrant excluded from evidence. By surrendering these rights, officers no longer need to develop probable cause to obtain a warrant in the first place. This essentially allows them to go on what attorneys call a fishing expedition, where they might find evidence of a crime, but may also find additional evidence linking a suspect to other previously unknown or undiscovered crimes. Waiving these rights places the suspect in greater jeopardy from this perspective. Assuming the case goes to trial, the suspect has harmed their case by freely offering additional and possibly incriminating evidence to the prosecution.
You get your attorney, you get situated in, you let me know. We'll sit down with you and your attorney. I think you got a story to tell.
And it was quite the story. Following his arrest, 10 other women had come forward, claiming that they had been assault victims of none other than Daniel himself. And while incarcerated, the suspect had attempted to regain contact with many of his alleged victims by writing handwritten letters. Although in a conversation from jail, he learns that this may not be a possibility with at least one woman.
Did you get a chance to go see what the address was? He said she does not want anything to do with you. Oh, well, how does that then?
Talked to her about 3 weeks ago.
Huh? Well, why didn't you mention something to me?
Because I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
Well, it don't hurt my feelings. I just wanted to send her a card, but And she said, don't, because if you do, she'll get you for harassment. I mean, a lot of these women that you want to, you're trying to contact, they're scared of you. Right? You know, I don't know, Danny. I don't know what you want to say. All right, well, enough said.
In one of the letters Daniel wrote, so many emotions in one, not sure why I'm writing now. First off, I guess you really didn't know me after all. I was never violent with you. You enjoyed my forcefulness, you told me many times, almost instructed me on what to do. You always told me you liked to be held down. Maybe your memory wasn't as good as mine. As the note continued, Daniel insisted that the unknown person was in favor of his disturbing actions. Although it hasn't been documented if Daniel was ever diagnosed, people with antisocial personality disorder often engage in this sort of emotional manipulation of their victims. They will attempt to persuade the victim into believing that they were at fault for the abusive actions. They're highly skilled at making victims doubt their own sanity along with their own memory of events, as Daniel is doing here with this letter. This is called gaslighting. In this case, he doesn't want anyone testifying against him, and he can't try to scare them into submission from his cell. So he needs to use his words to manipulate them into thinking they are wrong about what happened. And as we hear from one of Daniel's supposed acquaintances, Danny Fry, the horrifying nature of the suspected killer was confirmed even further.
Well, the whole time I've known him, he's been a womanizer, you know. It's his way or, you know, no way. And I know at one time, and this was, sure, God, it had been at least 20 years ago, but I believe a girl had to put a restraining order on him because he was stalking her.
Danny's descriptions of the accused murderer is an excellent depiction of a person with antisocial personality disorder. These individuals will often put their needs first and have little to no concern for the needs and feelings of others. This is how people like Daniel are able to commit such horrific crimes. In fact, people with severe antisocial personality sometimes derive pleasure from seeing the pain of their victim, physical or emotional. Many of these individuals are considered sadistic for this reason.
He was dating her, and she broke up with him, and he couldn't let it go.
This is because individuals with antisocial personality disorder don't consider the feelings or desires of the other person. They function in pursuit of what they want, and only what they want. Additionally, these individuals often have an inflated sense of self. Many of them think so highly of themselves that it is to the point of delusion. This can often cause them to become very vindictive and even aggressive if a love interest or romantic partner rejects them.
He was married to a girl named Kimberly at one time, and I guess she didn't tell me until here a while back that he used to be abusive to her, too. And then he was also married to a Bobby girl at one time, and she said that he was abusive.
Daniel and Bobby had a daughter together named Tabitha. On March 28, 2018, she sat down with detectives to give chilling details on the horrors that she encountered as a child, all thanks to her father. Supposedly, when she would visit Daniel every other week, seeing as he and Bobby were no longer together, Daniel would always have a new woman at the house, while acting out his violent fantasies. To no surprise, the women were allegedly under Daniel's rule, whereas he would punish them if he didn't approve of their behavior. He would reportedly grab the woman by her clothes or hair and take them to his bedroom. Once the door closed, Tabitha could supposedly hear the blood-curdling screams coming from inside of the torture chamber. It was something that she would never forget.
When he dated, you know, he was dominant. You know, they done what he told them to.
No first-hand knowledge or witnessing anything like that?
No, I've never seen him physically hit a woman or nothing, you know, just what they've told me and, you know, things like that.
Okay. And then
I don't know if my sister told you, but she had told me, I think it was beginning of the summer or whatever, that he tried to handcuff her to a chair. He paid her to come clean his trailer, and he tried to handcuff her to a chair.
Wow.
You know, I mean, she did have bruises on her, you know, her wrist and stuff.
He also claims that Daniel would use derogatory terms when referring to his girlfriends, basically to the point of dehumanization. This suggests that Daniel may have had a paraphilia-related mental disorder known as sadism, where an individual gains satisfaction when causing pain or fear in their partner. On top of this, psychopathy and sadism are linked, although the cause of this is unknown. But as we creep a little further down this twisted path, we learn that Daniel's crimes were darker, and there's a chance that Heather wasn't his only victim.
Did you know Leanne Sluter?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Yeah, there was about 5 or 6 years there that me and him didn't talk because my house got broken into, and some people told me that it was him because they seen him walking from behind my house that night.
Leanne Sluter, a girlfriend of Daniel's from years earlier and the mother of his child, Ethan Meyer, had tragically taken her own life back in 2009. Or at least, that's what authorities concluded based on her sudden death. But others believe that to be an utter and complete lie, especially Leanne's sister, Lori Ann Haley. In 2009, Daniel had apparently walked into Leanne's home, finding her lifeless body resting on the bed, with a single .22 caliber rifle gunshot wound to her chest.
I brought my son home to his mom because we had the weekend deal, and I was here like an hour ago, and she answered the door. I'm like, well, maybe she's in the shower. So I went back home. Well, I had a key to get her home, and I came in, and she said, I need someone to come out here ASAP.
When someone starts telling an elaborate story during a 911 call, this is a major red flag for deception. Most people who find a dead body would request help right away and then answer pertinent questions that the operator may have, rather than delivering a monologue about how they came to find the scene. It already sounds like he's potentially building up an alibi. But the barrel of the firearm had been exceedingly long, and the trigger would have potentially been too far to pull had it been facing towards Leanne. Not only that, but the gun was resting quite neatly beside her, almost as if someone else had placed it there after committing the ultimate crime. However, there was also a note supposedly written by Leanne that Daniel had kept hidden away. Part of it reads, "I have loved you unconditionally without waiver, and all you ever did was use me as a bank, kick me to the side when the next best thing came along. All I ever wanted was to just die so that the hurt would stop." The note had supposedly been written in Leanne's handwriting,